All right, we're going to talk to Mark Paoletta now. His name has been floated as a possible candidate for Attorney General, and we're going to ask him if that's what's happening. All right, with me now is Mark Paoletta. He is the senior fellow at the Center for Renewing America and former general counsel for the Office of Management and Budget. And perhaps most important of all, Mark, I was told on Monday by Mike Davis that you are his number one pick for Attorney General at the Department of Justice. Please, do you have a response to this?
Mike Davis is a great friend, and he's a warrior and the greatest defender of President Trump. So flattered by that. We'll see who the president picks. I served President Trump in his first White House for 4 years, and it'd be great to serve him again in any capacity. Excited, amazing. What a fighter, what a comeback, and he's battle tested and, more wise about how the government works and picking the right people already. So it's just going to be, we did a lot of great things led by President Trump, in the first term. I'm just looking for, we're expecting great things coming for the next administration.
That was a lovely diplomatic answer. I think that it was very well done. Are you in the running for AG?
Again, there's lots of news speculation, but I'll let the president make his selection and support whoever he picks. Like I said, all the selections so far have been spectacular and exciting, and like I said, it's really great. As he said when he first was elected, surprised. I actually called it that he was going to get elected.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. I was on some show in September and said, he's the change agent, and Hillary Clinton is not, and the people want change, and it's as simple as that. But he hired people like I've written on about John Kelly and how disloyal he was, and people like Rex Tillerson, who, it's a different world in Washington, and I've been here a while, but I think the president learned a lot, and so you're seeing with the selections now. It's going to be a different Trump administration than the first one.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear what President Trump says behind the scenes. This is a little tangent from the Department of Justice, but to hear what he says behind the scenes about those appointments from his first administration, because some of them, to those of us who have been in politics or in media for a long time, we were like, whoa, that's weird. I remember when he appointed Rex Tillerson specifically, I was like, why this guy? Like, are you kidding? And Trump now goes, listen, I was in business. I knew all of these international developers and finance people, and you get to Washington, it's just this swamp he said, I'd only been to Washington like 9 times in his whole career. He didn't know these people, so he didn't know. Everyone was playing pretty and talking pretty. He didn't know. And he says, this time, I know what I'm doing when it comes to appointments. And so far, so good. I mean, I certainly have my favorites versus my lesser favorites, but overall, a solid pick. The couple of names that are being floated for AG are Andrew Bailey, Mike Davis, of course, your name, and Matt Whitaker. What do you think of this bunch?
All of them are great. Mike, I love Mike Davis. Mike Lee is a good friend, brilliant, a warrior. Andrew Bailey out of Missouri, great guy. Matt Whitaker did the job before, so it's I don't know if there may be, like I said, I've always talked about sort of fake news and the things that are out there. So there may be other people, right, that are being considered. And so like I said, it's never good to speculate. At least, the news can do it, but there may be more people. But I think the president's going to take his time and make sure that he's picking the right person because it is I think the most important agency. The tip of the spear for getting a lot of the things done, from deporting millions of illegal aliens, sealing up the border. All of those things take Department of Justice sort of resources, right? The legal support to get at the land along the border again, right? We were doing that under the first administration. And of course, the Biden administration shut it all down. All the legal requirements, declaring a national emergency to unlock some of the money to build the wall again, to finish up the wall. Going after sanctuary cities, right? People who obstruct, who protect rapists and murderers in their states and not let ICE and the federal government take these criminals, right? These illegal alien criminals, criminal time too, for being here illegally and then committing horrific crimes, and protecting them. And so, defunding those states or those cities, maybe even suing them for obstructing these federal law enforcement efforts. I mean, those are the kinds of things the Department of Justice is going to be doing. That's why it's such an important place. DEI, getting DEI out of our government. Suing companies and universities that implement these racist, right, and divisive and unconstitutional programs. Getting boys out of girls' sports, right? Defunding schools or doing everything legal to stop that. Investigating big tech and the suppression of free speech, right? The collusion with the federal government, doing an investigation into that, holding people accountable for that, right? Those are all Department of Justice things, right? Unlocking and sort of rescinding all of the Biden administration executive orders or attorney general memos on the environment that crippled, our energy production, right? As President Trump says, you can solve, a lot of the economy by unlocking our energy and making prices go down, because when energy goes up, everything, that supports food and all that goes up. And so I'm excited. I mean, the Department of Justice is a great institution. It's been, taken over by the swamp, as has the FBI. And so one of the things I've written on, Liz, right, is the president has every right to assert direct control, right, operational control, I call it, over the Department of Justice, right, over since Watergate, there's this notion, there's lots of examples to the contrary, but this idea that, the Department of Justice is independent from the president. He's not allowed to direct them and tell them to look into this or don't look into that. That's
Right.
just garbage. Like, that's absolutely ahistorical, and it's unconstitutional. You're not allowed to have an unaccountable agency, right? The president, as John Roberts said in his Trump v. U.S. case, in his opinion, the Constitution vests all of the executive power in the president of the United States. There isn't any wiggle room as to what's outside of the president's purview. Everything in the executive branch is committed to
So
him.
the president could give a directive to the attorney general to do something, and while it might cause an outcry in the mainstream media and leftists to be like, oh, this is not kosher, the president actually has the authority to give the attorney general directives?
100%. Yes. And I pointed out in a couple articles I've written how President Reagan in 1984, he directed the Department of Justice to drop a criminal investigation into a British airline. It was an antitrust investigation because he thought it was not good for our relationship with Great Britain. And the Department of Justice was objecting, and the president ordered them to shut it down. And guess what? They shut it down. President Bush, after the Rodney King incident, out in Los Angeles, and those police officers were acquitted, in the state court, and there were the riots beginning. President Bush, 41, came out and directed the Department of Justice to move into overdrive on their prosecution of those police officers, and they were indicted and convicted. And so you see lots of examples back in our founding days, right, of Washington, Adams, and Jefferson. There's this great piece by a former law clerk of Justice Thomas, who's my hero and I think the greatest justice in history, Sai Prakash, who wrote, I think the article is called Chief Prosecutor, and how literally our first three presidents, our founders, were directing the federal prosecutors on specific cases, telling them to, indict this person, not indict this person, drop this case. And so there's a history of it. And when you think about it, it can't be any other way, right? You want the president to appoint somebody who's going to implement the president's agenda, so he doesn't have to worry about sort of supervising the Department of Justice every day, right? That's my appointee. He's taking care of things. He knows what I want. I'm consulting with him. And so I'm going to be, doing all my other responsibilities, and that's why you have a presidential appointees, right, to carry out your agenda, right, to report to you. So my view is president needs to appoint a strong attorney general who will be faithful to implementing his agenda, everything I laid out and more in terms of even on the January 6th, the president said he wants to pardon or commute the sentences of J6 defendants, right? So that's something, setting up, doing that promptly, on day one. But when the president has a question or he wants the Department of Justice to look at something, he can as a general matter, right? He can also just say, I want you to focus on going after the drug cartels. I want you to seek maximum sentences for child sex trafficking or sex trafficking. Like there's no more, there's a moratorium on seeking the death penalty at the Department of Justice. That should go away on day one, right? And that could be the president saying, I'm directing the attorney general, no more moratorium on seeking the death penalty. Seek it in every case that you can, and seek maximum charging and maximum sentences. I mean, this is the kind he wants to focus on making America safe again, right? And going after these thugs, these drug cartels. And so I'll just say yes. The president can direct it. It's absolutely historically and constitutionally permitted.
So I think this is super interesting. I think a lot of people even people on the right are unsure of that, or have been unsure about this, because the left for the last, since Trump was in office, has been saying, oh, the president can't direct the Department of Justice. The president can't fire the special counsel, can't fire Robert Mueller, can't meet and say things to his attorney general. That's simply not allowed. Where did that line of thinking, I mean, you say it's incorrect thinking. Where did that line of incorrect thinking come from?
Again, there's been some responses to some of the stuff I've been putting up, and it's this idea that post-Watergate, right? Richard Nixon, and so from there, Liz, it's really interesting, and I'm going to put something else up on this. There's all these laws and all these practices that came out of Watergate that were really to cripple the presidency, right? You have the War Powers Act, right? That invades on the president's power to declare war. You have or to protect our government, our country. The Impoundment Control Act, which makes it illegal for the president not to spend every cent that Congress appropriates. So if you can do a job it's $100 million appropriation and you can do it for 80. If you save that $20 million, you're breaking the law, right? So it's like Congress kind of trying to control how the president's doing his job and taking away the agency of an efficiency, the agency of the president trying to run things more efficiently and not wastefully. So there's all of these kind of, as I said, those laws, the Independent Counsel Statute, which was passed in 1978, right, which allowed federal judges to appoint prosecutors. That is like the most core executive function. And there was a law that the Supreme Court upheld 8-1 with Scalia writing in dissent that was perfectly legal. It's monstrously unconstitutional. And I think the Supreme Court today, with all these great appointments, would strike that down in a heartbeat if it came before them, right? That law expired. Now you have these special counsels, but as opposed to an independent counsels under a statute that was appointed by federal judges, which sounds so bizarre even to say. But the point is, all of these things, and then this norm of the president not allowed to talk to the Department of Justice and direct them. And so you have these commentators saying that, right? Like, oh, this was in the past. It can't be any other way constitutionally, right? So they have to admit, and I point out, I've done a lot of work. There was George Bush in 2005, and several presidents they've directed the Department of Justice to look into oil companies on price gouging. Okay, so there's a directive not on a specific area, a specific industry, on a specific task. So there's lots of examples of it, but we shouldn't have to be saying, oh, here's examples here. The president has the authority. There's no other way to read the Constitution, right? He's the chief executive, the Department of Justice. He appoints that officer, and the attorney general and everyone else that's an assistant attorney general gets confirmed by the Senate. And all of those people are his appointees that he supervises under the Constitution. He's responsible for their work. So to say it any other way is to have a fourth branch of government that's not accountable to anybody. And that's what they want, right? Just like the FBI. Like the FBI is even one tick away. You have the Department of Justice and then the FBI. That's the same thing. Oh, you shouldn't, you shouldn't be able to supervise the FBI. Yes, you should. You should be able to say, I want to focus on this now. I want to focus on that, and I'm actually going to move employees around to work on the substantive areas that I want to focus on. And that's what I hope happens in this administration. It's going to be, as you just said, it's going to be blowback, right, from the chattering classes from the swamp, that somehow the president's breaking norms. He's not breaking norms, but it needs to, in my view, be done even more, aggressively in terms of asserting control.
Yeah, so essentially, this opposition to the president directing one of his agencies, which is the Department of Justice, is just a narrative of convenience. It's convenient for the left to not have the president in charge of his own executive branch, especially when they're using that branch via the deep staters embedded in the agencies to wage lawfare against the president. That brings me to my next question. So we look at the Department of Justice as a whole. You can in your answer, you can segment this to the FBI or any of the other sub agencies, but the Department of Justice as a whole has been weaponized against President Trump. There's simply no question about that.
Yeah.
Some of the people that have been involved in this, from Russiagate, those are Obama holdovers, to, special counsel investigations, to Jack Smith now, all of these people that have been engaging in lawfare against Trump, I fear we are just going to be like, okay, go away, go about your business. You're not going to have this position anymore. And they're not going to actually face accountability. And I say this not because I am a vengeful person, but because if we do not have penalties for law-breaking activity, then nobody is disincentivized from doing that again. The people who do bad things and get away with it, this is just, it's not even criminal justice 101. This is like disciplining a toddler 101. If they don't face consequences, they are going to be emboldened to do it again and to do it even worse. So how would you go about holding to account the people who, since the beginning of the Hillary Clinton campaign, since Trump came down that elevator in 2015, have been breaking the law at the Department of Justice to try to target Trump with lawfare?
Yeah. First thing I would, I'd recommend that the president release all the files, like in Crossfire Hurricane, right? Declassify. He tried to do that, right? He did that at the very, very end, but making sure those documents are released, making sure the documents that are with all of these different investigations are released. And what happens in that, Liz, a lot of times, right? You send it over to the department, these career people start to get involved, or even like again, you want people who are going to faithfully implement that request, that directive, right? So my view is that whatever is the decision on documents, if anyone's saying we shouldn't release it, it goes over to the White House for the president's counsel or the national security advisor, whatever it is, some group that brings it up to the president. So the president is, at the end of the day, the decider on what's getting released and what's not. If anything's not going to be released, it should be the president looking at it and making that determination. Then I think you should have investigations into people who abuse their offices. As you said, you said it perfectly, which is, I call it accountability, and I posted on that. Right? It's not. I don't call it revenge or retribution. I call it accountability. When people break the law, when people abuse the law, people lose faith in their government, and so you need to look back at those things, investigate it, and if they did, again, when you're doing an investigation, you want to gather up all the facts. Prosecute those people, discipline those people, whatever it is. But those things need to be done. I completely agree with you. I think the House of Representatives will be looking into it too, right? And so if somebody's going up, you could waive you could waive privilege. You can direct the people to answer questions. You can produce documents. You can also have a team and then seek charges and prosecute, looking at all of that stuff. We'll have access, right? The president, all the Department of Justice servers and that sort of thing. Those documents should still be there, and so that should be looked into. That should be investigated, and if appropriate, I think prosecuting people for their conduct. One thing I mentioned, the independent counsel statute, right?
Yeah.
I helped write the pardon for Cap Weinberger, if you were from Iran Contra. I've been around that long, and this is where, if you recall, the independent counsel, Lawrence Walsh, filed charges against Cap Weinberger that implicated President Bush in a bogus way 4 days before the election in 1992. I mean, so it was an early weaponization of the Department of Justice. He was an independent counsel who was hell-bent on destroying President Bush. I mean, just hated him. And literally a month after the election, the federal judge dismissed the indictment, saying it was like completely, statute of limitations had run on it, and this was bogus. But he did that to, weaponize the law to try and so I wrote the pardon for Cap Weinberger that was issued in December of 92. And here's the thing. There were so many independent counsel statutes that were really going after Republicans, right? That's when it got triggered. It was only when the independent counsel statute caught Bill Clinton, right? When Ken Starr was appointed, again, a monstrously unconstitutional law, but he gets appointed under the independent counsel statute and he goes after Bill Clinton, right? And we all know what happened there. Guess what? That's when the Democrats say, oh, we hate this law. This is a terrible law, right? There you go. They tasted what they inflicted on their political opponents. And they then dropped that law. And so, same thing here. We want accountability so that this doesn't happen again. Like just walking away from it and saying, oh, let's just move forward, to me, sends a wrong signal, will continue and perpetuate this thing the next time the Democrats are in. And again, what I call it is accountability. Make no mistake. That's what it is. It's accountability, and it needs to be done.
And I'd just like to record to reflect that I was 3.5 years old during the scenario that you just described. Almost 4, but still 3.5. Okay, so a first day for an attorney general in office. You have a wish list of 5 things that can be done just based on, being attorney general, not based on congressional approval. What would those things be?
Yeah, I mean, I think when the president selects his attorney general, certainly securing the border and moving on, deporting all these illegal aliens and having that as, number one, banning DEI, setting up a task force to go through the January 6th sentences and prosecutions. So those are the sorts of things. Big tech. Declaring a national emergency, so that the wall can be, you can get the funds to start building that wall again, securing the border. So there's a lot of things to do, and the president will be ready on day one.
And that'll be exciting. This is my actual final question because that just reminded me of another question. Big tech. This is actually a topic that there's a lot of debate in conservative circles about what should be done to big tech, because it's this weird toxic marriage between big government and big tech that has resulted in the censorship, the undercover censorship of a lot of conservatives, in addition to the outright cancellations, like the algorithmic suffocation and the demonetization and all of that. How do we actually, from a justice standpoint, not just a free market standpoint, how do we solve that? What has big tech done that is illegal that they can be held to account for that would actually change the environment on, I guess, all big tech platforms at this point except X?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's working with the federal government and suppressing, having the government telling them what to take down, suppress the speech, and looking into that collusion and then using it and turning it over to the government to have the government go after people and, criminalize free speech, which is completely odious. The other thing, the larger thing going back to day one is the president making clear to the American people that the Department of Justice and the FBI are like subordinate to him, right? That they are part of the executive branch and they are not unaccountable. I'd also fire Chris Wray on day one. So it really so much flows from the idea that the Department of Justice and the FBI are really out of control. Going after the Catholics going to mass, right? Parents at school boards, parents with transgender kids, right? That are getting these surgeries and these procedures, and the drug companies or the doctors lying about what's going on, right? And going after that and banning that in terms of making that illegal, working with states and all that sort of stuff. So all those sorts of things, are part of the, I would say, a very, immediate agenda when the president comes in on January 20th.
Well, it's going to be really exciting. I expect in the next maybe 24 hours, maybe 48, in the next days, we will certainly know who the president has picked. Mark Paoletta, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate all the work that you've been doing, and I appreciate your insight on all of this. Guys, you can follow him at the Center for Renewing America. He's also on X, as we all are at this point. Mark, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Liz.